I know that it's hard to generalize about people's experiences because even right now, um, depending on where you're living, the conditions are different. Some places are kind of opening up, and I think people are feeling a little bit of room to move. There's also, of course, a lot of conflicting information, um, and um, and I think that my sense is that there is people are still acutely aware of um, the tenuousness of progress, what we might call progress in terms of just the conditions of COVID uh, um, and also just the fragility of everything in this life. And I know for many, the pressures and stresses are still mounting and compounding in various ways. And so I think it is still, it's an acutely challenging time. And my hope is that all of you are, and maybe because of that, or hopefully really working with your own mind and working directly with this territory. Because outer conditions are only part of the picture. And what is happening in here in response to the outer conditions is always a huge part of what's going on. And this is the domain that we can work in, right? We really can't do much about a lot of the outer conditions. And that's a humbling truth that we realize again and again throughout our life. And outer conditions just mean the conditions of our lives, including the economy, including the big forces at play in the political world. Not that we can't do anything about that in a kind of work towards change way, but in terms of right in this moment, you're not going to change the conditions as they are in this moment in a big way externally. Even the condition of your own body. Have so little control over in terms of whether it's healthy or not, and what's working and what's not working, even with our own bodies. And I hope that all of you practicing are seeing in your own experience how much what's going on in your mind and how you relate to it affects everything. I mean, the extent to which it affects cannot be overstated, including literally the world that you experience yourself living inside of or living within, and your whole sense of who and how you are, all affected so much by what is happening in here and how we relate to it. So I mentioned in one of the morning meditations this week, maybe it was Friday, how important it is to include and to notice this delicate dance of feeling like you are okay, like you have it together. Like, even if things are hard or difficult, there are these moments where you feel like, oh, I've got this. I have what I need in this moment. I can handle things in this moment. That sense of togetherness or being okay. And how quickly it can tip into an intense vulnerability or into not feeling that you have anything together or much together and not having a sense of okayness or settledness. And because of the challenging conditions, probably every one of you, if you're paying attention, are noticing being in this dance, and having moments of it being this way and moments of it being this way. And I want to reinforce this point that I made in the morning because I think it's very important. A lot of people hold the mistaken idea that if you're practicing well, you will always feel grounded or feel together, and often treat it like something has gone wrong when you feel intense vulnerability or intensely the fragility of the setup or the conditions as they are, or feel that things have tipped and you actually don't um, have it together, meaning have the conditions arranged the way you need them, or even have a sense of inner stability. And sometimes I think I might be at fault for this because I use the word stability so much in talking about stability and awareness, which is a dimension of what we cultivate, right? As we are more used to being present, that presence has a kind of robustness to it. However, I hope all of you are noticing. Yeah, and sometimes it's easy to just only identify with the parts of having it together. And sometimes if you're in conditions that are fairly comfortable now, or you're not in any danger, nobody that you know is, and you have your livelihood intact, and for now you have your health in an okay place. And I think it's very easy to think that that's the way things are. Yeah, and to, in a sense, try to deny the fragility of life or the great vulnerability in having a human body. And so I think it's so important to actually, and also if things are very difficult and very unstable, sometimes one cannot notice the moments because it doesn't fit into your story about things. Notice the moments in which actually, even though the conditions may be completely coming apart from the standpoint of the way they were previously arranged, to not notice the moments of stability when, even though things are very hard, you have this sense of there's an okayness in this moment, or I'm okay in meeting this moment. So it's very important to include both sides of any polarity in our human experience, to not try to have love and not anger or hate, right? You're going to have both. So anytime there's a polarity, and this is just one polarity, feeling together, feeling not together, yeah? Feeling secure, feeling unstable, yeah? Feeling kind of strong or robust, and feeling weak or vulnerable. So my hope is that you will, in your practice of awareness, that you will include both, so that just like right now, it's together, and this is the experience of it feeling stable and together. And you will equally include, oh, this is the way it feels when it's unstable. Oh, this is that great feeling of vulnerability or the fragility, and you're including that in awareness. Then it's not just that it's fragile, this is this feeling of fragility, or this feeling of vulnerability, or this feeling of not knowing, this feeling of confusion or disorientation. Yeah? That way your practice is much more robust. You will have both sides if you're paying any kind of attention. And as we include both, it relates to that phrase I used a while back. It's the right now it's like this. You say, right now it's like this. And right now it's like this. And right now it's like this. And then all of this is included. And the paradox is the actual, for lack of a better word, stability or groundedness or okayness does not come from that sense of having all the conditions together. It comes from being able to be present with the variety of conditions that are here, including chaos internally, including not having it together, including feeling the vulnerability of this human life, which we don't know how long it will last. We don't know the conditions in which it will come to an end, both for ourselves and for everybody else, for everybody that you love and care for. We don't know, how long we have, or what conditions will bring this life to an end. And so that is, so this is an aspect of what we are living with, whether we're including it or not. So as I mentioned, these polarities, love or care and kindness, and also anger, hate, rage. Sometimes in these spiritual worlds, people say like, oh, well, love is what we're supposed to have. Care and kindness is what we're supposed to have. That's me being good and on my path. Anger and rage, and that's not what we're supposed to have. We're supposed to move away from that. And actually, something is missed in this when you practice, when you don't include those strong emotions that people often label as negative. Of course, the consequences of those emotions, when acted out, can be extremely destructive. So it's not to say that they are not, can't be destructive. But for you as practitioners to really include in awareness both sides of this polarity, you include both and are bigger than both, whatever you are, because both arise within you, not just within this body, but within being, within awareness. So we're aiming at something. You're actually not aiming at it. You are it. There's something that transcends these opposites, that includes both sides. And the real balance is not in having one side of a polarity win. If you try to have love win, I'm only love, I don't hate anybody, unless that's actually the case, which it isn't for probably any of you. That just ends up being a denial of all of these feelings of anger or resentment or frustration and rage. And that denial and going toward the light, if you will, just leads to a tremendous backlash at some point. And so we want to actually include and not be afraid of these other aspects of mind. Yeah. So we hold both sides of the party. Loving feeling is like this. Anger is like this. We're including them both. That's what we call balance of mind. Yeah. That allows us to not identify with either side of the polarity, virtue or what we label as the opposite. So, including, so I've touched on this many times, but it's very important so that your practice includes the full dimensionality of your human beingness, of your human life, and all of the energies that appear within it. Then those energies are fuel for this wakefulness that is here all the time, even as these energies are coming and going, these impulses, these states of mind. And, you see how little it takes to bring out some kind of anger, and then include that in your awarenessing without making it bad. I so much of the time I hear people's questions say like, oh, these negative emotions, and that's even in some of the tradition, talk about negative emotions. And I think part of the reason that's in there, of course, is because of the destructiveness that comes from, people unconsciously acting out certain things, right? So maybe better to, if you only have two options, repress it and act nice, or act it out, maybe it's better to suppress the rage. Yeah. However, if you or your anger and frustration, I'm not sure about that. But if you have a practice of awareness, and you have a meditation practice where you have learned how to be present, and you're starting to learn how to be present with more and more of your experience, then it's quite different. Then you need to include these other things, and you'll start to feel off when you're denying, when you're pushing away. Yeah, because that pushing away creates a division within you, separating you from you. Of course, all of these energies, they're not you in an ultimate way, but they're part of your experience and they're meant to be witnessed and seen in awareness. So that's one aspect that I wanted to touch on tonight. Right? So that, and you will notice that the energy in your system will start to feel more full when you're including the fullness of your experience. Yeah? And you can do it little by little. You don't have to do it all at once, including the sadness when it's present. Sometimes we think it has to be one or the other. Even in the pandemic, sometimes we think, oh, if it's a pandemic and I'm experiencing some suffering or others are, then I can't be having any kind of joy or enjoyment, or there can't be parts of it that are actually I like, right? And that's because we think we have to choose. Yeah, we can't hold two different truths simultaneously and have them both be true, which is a very important thing for all of us to learn how to do. Yeah. So that's one piece I really want to be very clear about, so that your practice includes the totality, the joys and the frustrations, and then expands in all directions to include more and more. Yeah. And as you do, and as we practice with what's here, you get less and less afraid of your experience. And as you get more comfortable with it and familiar with it, when you haven't hung out with any of these energies in yourself, they might feel a little scary at first. And so you might want to hang out very briefly. Say, oh, what's this feeling? I don't know, I'm going to be with it for a few moments, and then you could go back to the breath or open your eyes. But you start to, little by little, hang out with what's here. Hang out with the energies that are coming and going, with the mind states that are coming and going, the full range. That experience of pinging and ponging between the opposites, between and maybe you notice this in your day too, like the virtuous you and unvirtuous you, or productive you and lazy you. That's something I think comes up for people. Some people are like, oh, I need to be very productive. Oh, I'm not being productive. And that's a polarity. Yeah. And we're identified with it both ways. So many of you identify with that piece. And so you can, and rather than pinging and ponging between, I'm always this one who's on my way this way or this way, you just include both. Oh, this is what it's like when it's feeling productive. And this is what it's like when it's not seeming that way. Of course, that's also a narrative, right? But include both. Right? There are very few people who, when I think looking back on their lives, I was very productive, No, this is like, so anyway, there's so many polarities, and you can kind of notice the ones that for you, you kind of very identified with, or where you push away or deny half of your experience. Yeah. Okay. So let's see what I have. I don't want to do too much. At the risk of doing too much, I want to mention one other piece. And that has to do with what's called in the early Buddhist teachings, the three characteristics of existence or of experience. Right? So this is a useful, just a useful pointer to some things you can notice about the nature of the experiences you're having from moment to moment. So there was the reason I thought to mention this is because there was an email from one of you. And there were so many emails, by the way, because I had asked, oh, what are themes that you want to, there were so many emails that it kind of was, I probably should have been careful asking for that. And then I haven't gotten to many of them, so I apologize. for that. But there's just an interesting framing in one of the emails that I thought it got me thinking and wanting to give this teaching on the 3 characteristics. It says, I've been struggling with this question or issue since I learned about meditation years ago, and it actually put me off of practicing for a long time because it seemed so absolutely impossible. You referred to it recently during a meditation when you were talking about letting go of me and mine. I heard this and thought, no way, that will never happen for me. Though I was aware that this was just a thought I was having, it still felt very real and true. Anyway, it goes on about feeling like they're my thoughts, my feelings. Yeah. And I thought that was just a very interesting thing, letting go of me and mine, in relation to some of this content I'm talking about the polarities and all the various states that appear in your mind through the day and that affect you. So it's interesting because you could say, maybe I did say, let go of me and mine, but I don't think I ever said that way. And the Buddha never said it that way. In a way, what we're learning to see, and this is not something you can do volitionally, we're learning to see by paying close attention in real time. We see not only the content of our experience, like this is the thought that's appearing, or these are the kinds of thoughts that I'm having a lot, or this is the feeling I'm having a lot, this is the kind of feeling I'm having, or some of the patterning, which maybe you start to notice when you pay attention. Oh, in this kind of situation, I have this feeling very reliably arises, or this thought, this story reliably arises, right? So you're noticing some of that. So as we get a little concentrated here in presence, and we start to be able to be more clearly aware of not just the content that's arising, but the process, right? So we see not only content, we see much more clearly into the process. We start to understand the nature of these phenomena more deeply. And just to say, it's understanding the nature of the phenomena that allows us to not take things that are not worthy of being called me and mine as personal in the way we usually do. And so it's really, in a way, the fact that we're so identified with some of our thoughts and feelings and experiences is the result of not seeing clearly. That's kind of a basic premise in early Buddhism, in the Buddhist framing of the kind of what meditation is about, or what practice is about. And it's not that it's not that you're not seeing clearly through some fault of your own. It's that we have not cultivated the conditions here that allow us to see clearly, including all of the things you cultivate with your meditation practice and your living with awareness practice, which is like learning how to abide here and learning how to be present with experience moment by moment, the kind of unifying and settling and strengthening of presence that comes, or awareness that comes about from that, attention that comes about from that. Being able to then witness what appears moment by moment, including the sensations and the reactions and thoughts and states of mind, that kind of witnessing. Yeah. So as that gets stronger, and I'm just saying this so you don't think you're doing something wrong by feeling identified with the content. Everybody feels identified with the content. That is the situation that the Buddha was pointing out thousands of years ago. Right? So it's not created by social media or by watching too much TV or by having a modern lifestyle. This is something that's like part of a human situation that was pointed out before we had any of that stuff, which is that we are very identified with our thoughts, with our feelings, with our emotions, with our reactions as me. That's who, this is mine. Yeah? So that's normal. So it's not like you should be able to let that go. Well, Will said, let go. No, you won't be able to let go of that volitionally. Letting go comes from clear seeing. Because what we let go of is we let go of what doesn't work. We let go of the false. In a way, we could say, ignorance can't hold up in the face of the truth. When you see the truth of something, you can't go back to seeing it the other way. And you could say that about Copernicus, right? Yes, like people used to see, well, the sun obviously goes up and down. I mean, I can see it happening. And so there we go. Turns out it's not that way at all. We just didn't have the instrumentation to notice it until a certain point, or the calculation to know that the sun's not moving at all in relation to us. We're actually, I'm not sure if it's not moving at all, but we're doing the main moving in that situation. So when we sit and we get quiet, and also once you have a bit of stability, you can notice this throughout the day. It's not only in the meditation. We start to notice much more clearly. And this, as practice deepens, and this stuff does deepen, we see this more and more clearly until it becomes just really, really obvious. What do we see? We see not just the content of what's arising. Oh, now it's a thought, now it's a feeling. We start to see the process, and we start to see the nature. And so the teaching on the three characteristics is a pointer to the nature of the phenomena, something about the nature. And what are these three characteristics? One is that everything in the phenomenal world, but including everything that arises in this mind and body, but it includes actually everything, is impermanent. It's coming and going. Now that's just academic, right? We can say like, oh yeah, I know that. No, we don't. There are levels to this knowing. When you know that states are impermanent, when you really know this, and I'm sure the degrees of really knowing this are beyond what I can imagine, but even the little that I have come to understand, there are degrees in which we understand, when you understand that states are impermanent, you stop seeking after states. It's like this, when you know that everything that arises passes, it's like the mind can't start wanting to latch onto a state of mind as a solution, as like the desirable location. It doesn't mean you don't prefer some states over others. That's different. Of course, but that thing of like, so the states of mind that we experience are impermanent. We often are not sustaining attention long enough to notice that, or paying close enough attention to notice everything in your experience, your sensations, your feelings, your emotions, your reactions, your thoughts. They're so momentary. When you're not grasping onto them and like kind of keeping them, elongating them through a story, they're just like, it's very rapid. And that's how we stop identifying. That's one way we stop identifying with what's arising in us as some kind of like, this is who I am in a fixed way. Because when you start paying attention, which one are you? Your states are changing throughout the day. Your thoughts are changing from moment to moment. Which version of you are you? Depending on what you think, you're quite different. And of course, we live inside a thought construct of who we are. So that thought construct has a little bit more of an illusion of stability. We live in the same thoughts unexamined. But even if you do a day of practice or a half a day, you'll start to notice, oh my, you identify from moment to moment with how you're feeling, but you don't notice it. You don't notice how it's changing. In the morning, you wanted to scream and run away. By the afternoon, you had a moment of like feeling tired and sleepy and thing, and then you felt inspired and energized. And so that's impermanence. So we're going to do just the short version of it tonight, but this is something you can observe. See if it's true, rather than saying like, oh, everything's impermanent. Say, is it impermanent? Can I observe it? You can even ask yourself the opposite question as a practice. When some state is present, say, is it permanent? And then watch. Stay with it. See if it's permanent. Yeah. So those are very important. When we start to see much more deeply the impermanence of what's arising in the mind and in the body and in your experience, it's much harder to grasp onto it as something like me in some kind of ultimate way, because you are a cascade of lots of different states and feelings. So which one are you? Yeah. Exactly. Like all of it is part of me. That's fine, but that's very different than the way we usually identify with it. And there's also a lot more, when you're paying attention, like I said about the polarities, there's a lot more than fits into your neat story. Yeah? And so it starts to get very vast. It's like, oh, I'm ever, the whole universe of experiences. Well, okay, go ahead. If you identify that way, that's very different. So you can't rush that, but you can watch. Watch the thoughts you identify with. Watch the feelings, and watch the ones you don't identify with. Sometimes you have thoughts you don't identify with. That's just out of habit. So that's one. Yeah, it's impermanent. And the other is that it's when you cling to what's impermanent and you identify with it, when you try to hold on to it, you experience mental suffering. That's another characteristic. The phenomena, because of their impermanent nature, conditioned nature, you experience dis-ease when you grasp onto it. And so they say that the second characteristic is dukkha, meaning suffering. But it's not that like everything is inherently suffering. It becomes suffering when you cling to it and identify with it. So you can notice that too. This is why when William Blake says, he who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy, right? But he who kisses a joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. I think that's it. Something like that, paraphrase. So it's like, what's that pointing to? It's pointing to the same thing. You bind yourself to a joy, even in the moments like you want that to continue. If you're really paying attention, that's distress right here and now. Yeah. So we learn to see that. Oh, it's that, when we can allow experience to be, then the dis-ease eases a bit, right? Even when it's painful, it's just we're always grasping onto it. So that's another characteristic. So that when we grasp onto what is inherently impermanent, we suffer. We experience, we're always clinging to the condition. Let me cling to the condition of my body, yeah? So anyway, moment by moment, you can watch your inner experience and use the 4 foundations of mindfulness that we were talking about the other day. That's the territory. That's the territory that you're observing that is impermanent, that is creates mental disease when clung to. Just notice that clinging, that sticking to it. And notice what happens when you don't cling to it. Then you have joy, and it's just joyful. The kids are like, it's joyful, and then it switches, and then it's something else. Okay? So that's the second characteristic. And the third is that it is selfless in nature. So I say, does that mean let go of me and mine? No, it's saying that, and there are different ways of describing this. So the third characteristic of experience is one is what arises due to conditions. You don't, and I've referenced this before, but you don't decide what arises. It arises due to myriad conditions that are way beyond your control or even your knowing. You know, what thought is going to arise next? What sensation? And if you read and you could go deep into this in ways that aren't even, don't relate to meditation, or if you read Robert Sapolsky's stuff on, kind of all the conditions that shape what goes into even the biology of certain kinds of behavior and reactions. That's just a very interesting lens into the selfless nature. Yeah. So arises due to conditions. It is ungovernable by you. You don't control it. In that sense, it's selfless. Right? So when we start to see that, we start to see what's arising in our experience as nature, not as me in the way we usually are identified with it. Start to see, oh, it's impermanent. It's arising and passing moment to moment. Oh, when I cling to it, when I cling to what's here and identify with it, that leads to this dis-ease or this mental irritation or distress. Also, what's arising is arising due to conditions. Yeah? And then when we start to see that, thoughts arising like sound, sure, there's some patterning to it, but even the patterning is selfless. You don't decide for that patterning to be there. So when we start to see it as nature, we start to take it less personally. You can't help it, just like you don't take the weather personally. So again, that's something that you learn from your direct experience. It's good to have these teachings like conceptual pointers, and then you can look to see if it's true. But it only becomes transformative when you see it deeply for yourself. Yeah, when you start to see your own thoughts as like weather patterns, or your own emotional reactions as like weather patterns. And of course, you meet those weather patterns with awareness. Now, if the conditions, so that relates to something that's in the teachings from before. They often use the metaphor of the Buddha like a doctor. So the doctor diagnoses the condition, right? And the condition, in a sense, is not seeing things the way they are, which leads to greed, craving for certain kinds of things, identifying with experience, aversion, like pushing life away, hating it, not wanting to identify, wanting to not be identified with certain things. And then, of course, ignorance, which is the underlying condition. So the Buddha is seen as like the physician diagnosing this issue of not understanding the nature of things and prescribing the treatment, which is the practice. Yeah? So this is why practicing is so important, because it's like, if you don't practice, then it's like you have your medication, but you don't take it. So you have a great doctor, great diagnosis, great medication, but you don't take the medication. You probably won't get the cure. Right? So this is, it requires more of you than just popping some pills. To look deeply into the nature of the phenomena of your own mind and body. To see into the nature. See, is it really like this? Is it impermanent? What happens when it's clung to or identified with? What happens in the mind stream? And is it selfless in nature? Is it arising due to conditions like this? Is it ungovernable in that way? All of this. And that's not the only show in town. There's something knowing it. This is the good news. This is the great news. You are knowing these conditions. Something is knowing this impermanence. In order for impermanence to even be noticed, there must be something knowing it coming and going. In order to be able to notice clinging and non-clinging, there must be something here, knowing, clinging, non-clinging. If all these conditions are arising like nature, unfolding moment by moment, how is that experienced? There must be something here knowing it. So that points you also to something. We don't want you to let go of what you are. But as you see more clearly, you will come to let go of what you are not. You will come to let go of identifying with these conditions as me in the way that causes this kind of freezing of the psyche, or fixing of it, and in a way that causes this feeling of extreme tension, tightness, fear, and limitation. So seeing that nature, both of the phenomena, helps us identify with it a little less. Identifying with it even a little bit less helps us to rest back in our nature. Yeah. Oh, just of what's here, knowing it all. So I get it, somebody says like, let go of I, me, and mine. Some part of the system sort of rejects it, says like, no. So in a way, it's kind of the opposite. As you let go of just kind of grasping onto or being in that polarity dance, or kind of identifying with this thought or that thought as me in some fixed way, as you let go of that, you just rest more in what you are, which is something much more vast, much more all-inclusive. This wakefulness, which is what religions are about. This beingness or presence that you are. Okay, so I got carried away. It went on for a bit. So we talked about polarities. We talked about holding both, or awareness, including the opposites, the worlds of opposites, as opposed to our usual personal strategy, which is like preferring one and ping-ponging back and forth. We also talked about the characteristics of existence, or of phenomenal existence, including what's here in this mind and body, and seeing deeply into the nature of the phenomena. Seeing these characteristics on deeper and deeper levels is what allows for the non-identification with what is impermanent, what is suffering when clung to, and what is selfless in nature. Yeah, and leads us naturally to identify less with that, which allows us to rest more here in what is more reliable. Okay. So I'm going to, that might have been a little too much for one evening, but with all of this stuff, just, you don't have to remember all of it, just get the feeling of it. And that might be enough. Maybe one thing will stick with you, and you can practice with that. So I'm going to look at some of these questions, and let's see. Here's one. Let me find the participants. Nancy H., would you be okay? I'm going to allow you to talk. And then would you want to ask your question?
Sure.
For all of us? Hi.
Sure. Thanks, Will. It's just that I come in the mornings and sit with you, and I'm all inspired, and I'm going to notice, what goes on during the day. And sometimes I do. And I get a little bit of a sense of, I think, what you were just talking about. Sort of like things kind of relax around me. And but mostly I come back the next morning and go like, oh, Right. I forgot to do that. I think, well, I could set timers and things, but that doesn't do it for me. And
Yeah.
like
So
such a simple question, like how do people do this? But
it's a great question. I think it's a great question. And I love the honesty, because you acknowledge in a way how hard it is. Something so seemingly simple, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So I love that. I think that's great that you can notice that. And you can notice that even when it's something that you say, oh, when you do notice, that changes your experience in some palpable way.
it does. It
And
does.
yet it's still hard to notice. Yeah. And so I'll just say a couple things, a couple that are sort of practical,
Okay.
and then maybe something more general. Uh, so practically, it can be helpful to pick like a couple activities during the day that you're going to consciously do with more awareness. And that could be just something as simple as like brushing your teeth or making coffee or tea or doing the dishes or just mundane activities. So if you started like, each week picking one activity that you're going to do
Mm-hmm.
with more heightened awareness, that will just start the ball rolling in terms of you including a bit more. And pick something that's easy for you to do, that doesn't require a lot of cognitive load.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And maybe if you look at your day, you could each week add another one, so you're not trying to rush it or do it all at
Mm-hmm.
once. Just add another activity each week, or it could be every few days, right? But you're beginning now to just, oh, this I do a little more awareness, and this I do. And then those activities start to become reminders. Yeah. And in that way, you can start to, even like at the end of your day, it can be very interesting to look back and say like, oh, what are the places where I remembered it all? And what are the areas of my day where I never remember?
Mm-hmm.
you know and so you can start to set little challenges for yourself. Like and that's what religious talismans are really for, I think. Like, not that you need to have something like that, but if you can hold something in your hand that reminds you, that's really helpful. That's what, like, those mala beads, I think, are for on an essence level. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're holding something, it reminds you like, oh yeah, I'm here, right? Or, oh yeah, remember the noticing. So there's a way in which we have to start slowly and not get discouraged by how vast the territory is of not noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually, the fact that you can say that tells me there's pretty good awareness present. A lot of
Oh.
people don't realize how much they're not noticing.
Uh-huh.
Because guess what? Every time you're noticing, you're noticing. So people are great at deluding themselves. It's like they just don't notice the vast territory between moments of noticing. So something's awake enough in you that you can notice that. I think that's great. And we want to be honest about it with ourselves and humble about it. Like, oh man, wow, this is really as simple as this stuff seems. Like, all this territory, like, so a lot of people, as soon as the mouth opens, it's gone, you know? So anyway, you set little challenges, and little by little, you can practice like that. Then you can notice, oh, it's with these certain kinds of emotions or feelings, I tend to not include, not to practice. So I think that's what I'd say for now. Start small. Pick one thing at a time.
Thank
Is
you.
that
That sounds doable. Thank you very much.
doable? Good. That's what we're going for. We're going for doable. All right. Thanks, Nancy. Um, let's see. I'm trying to Okay, let's go to the next one. Tiffany, can I'm going to unmute you. Hey, Tiffany, would you want to?
Yeah, sure thing. I will say that your speaking to polarities in the beginning helped a lot. But my question for everyone listening is around how to practice cultivating more tenderness towards each other in a time where there's a desire to self-protect and save ourselves from each other, and
Yeah.
just really noticing. And this isn't unique to or different than non-quarantine time. Like, my ego has plenty of opinions about what is right and healthy and best in order to keep itself safe. But it's especially chatty in these times as restrictions start to lift, and has a whole new flavor of self-righteousness that kind of chokes out my ability to stay open-hearted, and to not get swallowed up by my judgments because I so desire to stay safe. So just noticing the hardening, and yeah, what you'd shared about paradox definitely helped in terms of thinking about, it's okay that I'm feeling a longing for connection and softness while also noticing that fear is present, or resentment or judgment is present.
And I'm imagining this is like around people who are not holding to the same standards of like safety and stuff.
Yeah, and it gets particularly inflamed with family members who live in different places that are just in different stages, different mindsets. And want to like connect with them and love them through this, and then finding myself getting so irritated at their ideas of what I should be doing, or my ideas of what they should be doing.
Yeah. This is not an easy one, and because well, I guess maybe in the polarity domain, like both sides of it are important, right? Like on the one hand, safety matters, right? So it's important not to deny that, and say like, oh, we need to just love each other. But safety is a real thing. Like if you see somebody doing something that you think is very dangerous, it makes sense that you have a reaction to it, right? Like I think that's important to honor too. And then I think the other side of it, which is, I think it's sort of important, this is like a reflection, and I know this for myself, is that any of us only have the consciousness about something that we have.
Right.
And that's so, like, I noticed that around my own process of realizing that this was really serious, and it was just because I was talking to some people who actually knew what was really going on early. I probably had an awareness of it earlier than a lot of people. But I'm super aware that I did not have any awareness of it before that. And it's only a result of my trust in those people and what they told me and the way they did that my consciousness changed. And once your consciousness changes, and this happens to all of us whenever we get on board with something, it's very easy to forget that other people have not had that change, and so then it's very easy to be kind of righteous about it in a way that's different than like, I still need to keep myself safe and I need to keep, you see what I'm saying? It's not that doesn't negate the need to like even sometimes tell somebody to stop doing something or to move, ask them to move or whatever.
Right.
But I think that piece of like where the compassion comes in, or the kind of a connection, or you said tenderness, is in that thing of like wow, we only have, all of us, including me, it's only when I actually really have a certain consciousness that I then, and that's kind of impersonal almost, then I'm on board. And I notice people who I had conversations with who were very dismissive of this stuff are now like really outraged at other people. But I remember, and I'm not calling anybody out, but and it was not anybody from this group, but I really remember the conversations before. And it's just like, okay, that's just our human, that's very human, right? And I sometimes have a feeling like this is what people who really work in around climate change must feel like all the time.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You know, it's like they're really aware of something, and like everybody else is not, and it just must be so frustrating, and yet it's also like, you know, it's unless you really know something, you don't know it. So it's just like that's so hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what you were saying about there being conflicting information, like there always will be, but
Mhm.
yeah, there's only so much we can feel like is like a capital T truth for us based on
Yeah.
our study, our experience, what resonates with us, what we choose to take and choose to leave. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I think this is good. There were a bunch of, even last week there was, which we didn't get to, there were some questions about this kind of topic about other people. And I think it's really, again, it's important we hold both sides. So that understanding and that empathy doesn't mean we don't need to sometimes really try to wake people up to something, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that's like in each, for everybody, that's your own thing to determine, right? Is like, is this something where I still need to take it upon myself to like wake you up to this thing because because I care about you, or, you know, and not, again, that may not work.
Mhm.
But I think it doesn't dismiss action, but I think this is really, yeah. Anyway, I really appreciate that question. I think it's important and relevant to so many people. I'm sure so many people here tonight.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Um, Mary, would you be okay with me with asking your question? Let's see. Would you be okay asking your question out loud, or I'm also, if you don't want to, I can also just respond to what you wrote, but it's really up to you.
I can do it. Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
First of all, hi. It's nice to
I know. Thank you so much.
be here with you.
I don't know how to have my image. Sorry. Um,
I actually can see your picture, but
but it's just a picture. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it's
Sorry.
just a picture. Yeah, we're not set up to share video, although
Oh, good. Okay. Okay.
yeah, although we might do that at some
No,
point,
it's
but
good.
we've
I
been
just.
doing it a different way.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no
I
worries.
don't know how to say it simply. Basically, I've been having. I think I'm getting whatever. I'm just having feelings or thoughts come up of all sorts. One of which is grief feelings or sensations, thoughts, and letting them come, noticing, getting tripped up by them, noticing I'm getting tripped up. But the thing that's not mellowing is when I hear, I asked this before, so I feel like it's not mellowing that when I, let the language come at me of any number of things, but appearance, object.
Yeah.
I don't know what, it just keeps literally being this tripping. And I just sort
Yeah.
of, okay, well, I'm tripping. But I keep
Yeah.
having that tripping and I don't know
Yeah.
what to do with that. And then especially when it gets more elaborate, then I get very, very upset and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
When the language and the teachings.
So, because I think and we've talked a bit before
Yeah.
and stuff, is like, I think because it's tripping, you can tell that it's a language issue. You know,
Okay.
because those kinds of words are not they're not sufficient descriptions of like the fullness of human existence and life as experienced. They're meant to point us to certain aspects, like object, right? You say like, oh, the world is a bunch of objects.
Mhm.
That's not a very poetic way to live, right? So I think it's just a way of saying that it's being known in awareness, right? And so all this aspect of like, you know, the grief that comes up, you know, over real loss.
Mhm.
It's like the instruction is basically let yourself really feel it. Don't dismiss it or deny it. It doesn't mean anything is not real, you know?
Yeah, I guess real or not real is not language that's used, right? Or
Yeah, no, it's not saying real or not real.
it's
That's really important, because if you feel like it's negating your existence or the existence of people you love, that's just not healthy, you
but
know?
once again, it's a nuance. It's a
Yeah,
subtler relationship to that
yeah,
phenomenon, or
yeah.
is
I
that
mean, it's sort of like the impermanent side is like this truth, right? That our lives are impermanent. And that doesn't, in a way, that vivifies the preciousness of them, right? It's not, and the almost like unbearable grief that we experience when we're losing people that we love, you know?
but that is, sorry to belabor it,
So,
but that that is the nature of this, so
yeah,
of life.
of this, yeah. Well, it's part of the nature of life.
Part of it, okay.
Yeah, because it's sort of like, again, and
But
this
then
is really,
when love comes up and I'm feeling
yeah,
love,
yeah,
to hear like, oh, that's appearing as if it's equal with any other phenomenon
yeah.
appearing
And
before.
this is why,
Awareness is primary, but love or that bird chirping or the
mhm.
neighbor yelling, they're all equally just appearance.
Yeah, you know, this is why language is so this
Okay.
is why the concept layer is so important to not get caught in.
Yeah, that keeps.
Because even these teachings that are meant, it's sort of like they're all skillful means and none of them are ultimate.
Okay.
So for example, like I think what you're saying really, you could take the teaching on impermanence and tell
Right.
yourself a story about it that
Right.
completely puts you in a place of nihilism, right?
Right.
You just
Right.
say like, oh, everything's impermanent.
Yeah.
Then what's the point?
Right.
And what we miss there is that's a concept. That's a story.
Okay.
It's almost like stories are not equipped to handle the fullness
The
of
full. Yeah.
reality.
That it's way beyond that.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
way beyond that. So the teaching on impermanence is just to help us not be so identified with every single view that comes into the mind or thought, including the thought, because we want to see even the thought like everything's impermanent, that comes and goes.
Right.
When you're not thinking that, you're just living. And then when you're thinking that, either you're depressed or you're feeling liberated. You know? So again, it's about how it's being used. And so we want
Okay.
to see the language that was being referred to as like objects or impermanence. We've got to really be careful to notice what these teachings are trying to point to a little bit and not cling to them as
Mhm.
stories.
Yeah.
Because as stories, they are not sufficient.
Yeah, they're just pointing. And then
Yeah.
the first thing you said, that if I'm tripping, it actually, it itself can be like, oh, that word isn't landing the way it's necessarily intended to, or something.
Yeah, yeah. Especially because in certain circumstances, some of this language can feel invalidating,
Yeah.
right? And it's not meant to do that. It's meant to point out where we're usually really grasping.
Yeah.
But if it ends up being invalidating, that's the opposite of all the other side of the polarity of the teaching, which is
Right.
all about welcoming and being with and
Yeah.
including everything, right?
Yeah, that's where I really can find a way in. And then, yeah, this tripping up, I just wanted to find a way to include that
Yeah.
as opposed to feel like I keep getting thrown out or something. So thank you.
Yes, that's so important.
Thank
So
you.
and I think I'm really glad we talked because, yeah, when we're always getting caught up in something,
Yeah.
right? Or in some tangle. And so just to notice and include it. But I think you brought us to something very important about these teachings. Is they're meant to be pointers, invitations to inquiry, and as a story, as like a new set of beliefs
Yeah.
to build the story out of, they're just as harmful as anything else.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice to talk.
Yeah.
I'm glad we could talk.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are at the end of our time together. And let me just do one thing here. So Mary, I think you're still unmuted. Let me just see if maybe you could mute yourself. I don't know how to do it from here somehow. Yeah, maybe, yeah, there you go. So just a couple announcements before we close. I'm in the final stages of putting together the kind of written out version of the instructions, and I'll put them on the website this week. Also, we have I think Polkit posted the donation page in the chat. And so I just want to thank all of you for your support and helping to support me in this offering of, for our community. And so anything you can offer is welcome and appreciated. And again, I do this freely so that it is really open to all and not something that has a wall or any kind of barrier to entry. And so if you feel moved to support by donating on the website, then that's very welcome. And I also consider your practice a support. And I feel very good about that as a free and open offering. So I just want to say that. So yeah, the post for the donations is just up a few on the chat. It says sundaysangha.net/community/Donna. And also the book I referred to earlier, seems like somebody had a question, was Robert Sapolsky's book, Behave, which is a really interesting lens on selflessness, even though he probably didn't mention that word once, but it's basically gives you a real dose of that. And then Gretchen put in the full William Blake quote. So thank you for that, Gretchen, too. So let's just sit for a moment and we'll formally close for this evening. So may each one of us, and in our own way, continue to look deeply into the nature of things and into the nature of our own mind and our own heart. And may we be willing to see things as they are. And may this clear seeing, this clear knowing, free us. And may this be for the benefit not only of ourselves, but of all beings everywhere. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your earnest questions, and there were a bunch of questions we didn't get to, and I'm sorry for that. So keep up the practice, and we'll see you soon.